The distant thunder of hooves echoed across the vast Wyoming Territory as Hope Johnson watched the silhouette of her father's wagon disappear over the horizon. At 18 years old, she stood alone outside the general store in the frontier town of Silver Creek, her possessions reduced to a single carpet bag and the clothes on her back. The year was 1876, and Hope had just become another abandoned soul in the unforgiving West. "He ain't coming back, miss," said the storekeeper, an elderly man with kind eyes who had witnessed the entire scene. "Your pa settled his debts with that gold nugget, but he didn't leave nothing for you." Hope clutched her bag tighter, willing herself not to cry. Her father had promised they would build a new life after her mother's death, but his gambling debts and whiskey habit had eaten away at their dreams until nothing remained. Now he had abandoned her too, trading her for a chance to start fresh in California. "I understand," she replied, her voice surprisingly steady. "Is there somewhere in town I might find work?" The storekeeper scratched his beard. "Widow Perkins might take you in at the boarding house, but she can't pay much. Otherwise, there's the saloon." Hope straightened her spine. "I'll speak with Mrs. Perkins, thank you." As she turned to leave, the door swung open, and a tall man entered, ducking his head beneath the frame. Dust covered his denim pants and leather vest, and a worn Stetson cast shadows over his face. When he removed the hat, Hope found herself looking into the most striking blue eyes she'd ever seen, set in a tanned face marked by days under the harsh sun. "Afternoon, Xavier," the storekeeper greeted him. "Thought you weren't due in town until next week." Xavier Quinn nodded, his eyes briefly meeting Hope's before turning to the counter. "Cattle drive finished early. Need supplies before heading back to the ranch." Hope slipped out the door, feeling those blue eyes follow her. She had no time for distraction. Survival came first. The widow Perkins did indeed need help, offering Hope a small attic room in exchange for cooking and cleaning at the boarding house. The work was hard, the hours long, but Hope was grateful. Each night, she collapsed onto her narrow bed, too exhausted to dwell on her father's betrayal. 3 weeks passed in this manner. Hope learned the rhythms of Silver Creek, a town that existed primarily to service the surrounding ranches and the occasional stagecoach passing through. She kept to herself, ignoring the pitying glances and whispered comments about poor Johnson's girl, left behind like unwanted baggage. On a Tuesday morning, while sweeping the front porch, Hope noticed a familiar figure approaching on horseback. Xavier Quinn dismounted with the easy grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. He tipped his hat to her. "Miss Johnson," he said. His voice was deep and gentle, surprising for a man of his size. "Mr. Quinn," she replied, wondering how he knew her name. "Can I help you? Heard you're good with figures. My foreman quit, and I need someone who can keep the books." He shifted his weight. "Pays fair. You'd have your own cabin on the ranch." Hope stared at him, suspicious. "Why ask me? We've barely exchanged 10 words. A small smile touched his lips. "Doc Simmons says you helped reorganize his medical records. Said you have the neatest handwriting and quickest mind he's seen in years. I'm not sure Mrs. Perkins would. Already spoke to her. She said it's your choice." Hope studied him. Xavier Quinn was known in Silver Creek as a fair employer who ran the most prosperous cattle ranch in the territory. Still, she hesitated. What exactly would my duties entail? Keep the books, order supplies, help with correspondence. He looked at her directly. "Nothing improper, Miss Johnson. I run an honest business." Hope considered her options. The boarding house work was wearing her down, and the pay barely covered necessities. A position at the Quinn Ranch meant independence, real wages. "When would you need me to start?" "Tomorrow, if possible. I'll send a wagon for you and your things." Hope nodded. "Very well, Mr. Quinn. I accept your offer." His smile reached his eyes this time, Good. I'll see you tomorrow then. The Silver Q Ranch sprawled across 5,000 acres of Wyoming Territory, with the Grand Tetons rising majestically in the distance. Hope's first glimpse of the main house took her breath away, a solid 2-story structure built from local timber, with wide porches and glass windows that must have cost a fortune to transport. Xavier directed the driver to a smaller cabin about 50 yards from the main house. This will be yours. My sister stayed here when she visited last summer, so it's properly furnished for a lady. The cabin was simple but comfortable, with a bedroom, small sitting area, and even a private washroom luxury Hope hadn't expected. Fresh wildflowers stood in a jar on the table. Mrs. Holloway comes up from town to cook for the ranch hands, Xavier explained. You're welcome to take meals with us in the cookhouse, or she can bring something here if you prefer. The cookhouse will be fine, Hope said, taking in her new surroundings with wonder. When would you like me to begin work? Tomorrow morning. Rest today. Get settled. He lingered in the doorway. If you need anything, just ask. That night, Hope sat on her small porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. For the first time since her father's abandonment, she allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope for the future. The ranch ledgers were in disarray, but Hope attacked them methodically, organizing months of scattered receipts and records. Xavier checked on her progress occasionally, bringing coffee and asking questions about her system. By the end of her first week, she had created a clear picture of the ranch's finances, profitable, but with room for improvement. You've done more in days than my last foreman did in months, Xavier said, reviewing her work. Where did you learn bookkeeping? Hope tensed. Her past wasn't something she discussed freely. My mother taught me. Before she died, she handled accounts for several businesses in St. Louis. Xavier seemed to sense her reluctance to elaborate. Well, she taught you well. As weeks passed, Hope found herself settling into ranch life. The Cowboys were respectful, if curious about the new lady bookkeeper. Mrs. Holloway, the cook, took Hope under her wing, sharing stories of her 30 years in Wyoming Territory. Mr. Quinn's a good man, she told Hope one evening as they shelled peas on the cookhouse porch. Built this place from nothing after his father died. Never seen him mistreat man nor beast. Hope had noticed Xavier's fairness with his workers, his patience with new ranch hands learning the trade. He worked alongside them frequently, never asking anyone to do what he wouldn't do himself. Spring brought the busy calving season. Hope found herself pulled from bookkeeping to help wherever needed, feeding orphan calves, assisting the ranch wives who came to help with the round-the-clock work. She surprised herself with her willingness to tackle any task, her hands growing calloused but capable. One night, returning to her cabin after checking on a sickly calf, Hope found Xavier sitting on her porch steps. I brought coffee, he said, holding up a thermos. Thought you might need it after your night shift. She sat beside him, accepting the warm cup gratefully. The little one seems stronger. I think he'll make it. Thanks to you. Xavier's eyes reflected the starlight. You're not what I expected, Hope Johnson. What did you expect? He considered this. Someone who'd run back to town at the first sign of real ranch work. Most city girls would. Hope smiled. I'm not most girls, and I wasn't raised to shy away from hard work. No, he agreed, his voice softening. You certainly weren't. The moment stretched between them, comfortable yet charged with something new. Hope found herself noticing the line of his jaw, the way his hands, strong and capable, cradled his coffee cup. Tell me about St. Louis, he said finally. Hope hesitated, then found herself speaking of her childhood, her mother's patient teachings, her father's business that had flourished until her mother's illness drained their savings. She stopped short of explaining how her father had changed after her mother's death, how the drinking and gambling had consumed him. And then you came west, Xavier prompted. Yes, for a new beginning. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. Xavier seemed to understand there were gaps in her story, but he didn't press. Instead, he told her about growing up on the ranch, learning ranching from his father, and taking over at 20 when the older man died of pneumonia. I was terrified, he admitted. Responsible for the ranch, the hands, everything. Made plenty of mistakes. You've built something remarkable, Hope said sincerely. He shrugged, but looked pleased. Still building. When Hope finally yawned, unable to hide her exhaustion, Xavier stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow's another busy day. At her door, he paused. Hope, I'm glad you accepted the position here. She smiled. So am I, Mr. Quinn. Xavier, he corrected. After all this time, I think we can dispense with formalities. Xavier, she repeated, liking the way his name felt on her lips. Good night. Spring melted into summer, and with it came new routines. Hope's responsibilities expanded beyond bookkeeping to include overseeing supplies, corresponding with cattle buyers, and even helping Xavier plan improvements to the ranch. They often worked late into the evening, heads bent together over maps and ledgers in his study. Hope found herself looking forward to these quiet hours, when the ranch grew still and conversation flowed easily between them. On a warm July evening, Xavier suggested they ride to the high meadow to check on a herd being moved to summer pasture. Hope had become a competent rider, no longer fearing the powerful animals that were the lifeblood of ranch operations. The meadow stretched before them, wildflowers creating a carpet of color beneath the vast Wyoming sky. The cattle grazed peacefully, supervised by two experienced hands who tipped their hats to Xavier before riding to the far end of the meadow. Xavier dismounted near a cluster of aspens, helping Hope down from her horse. Hungry? Mrs. Halloway packed us a basket. They spread a blanket in the shade, sharing cold chicken, biscuits, and fresh berries. Hope removed her hat, letting the breeze cool her face. Your hair looks like fire in this light, Xavier observed, his voice quiet. Self-consciously, Hope touched the auburn strands that had escaped her practical braid. My mother always said it was my distinguishing feature. One of many, he replied, then looked away as if he'd said too much. Hope felt a pleasant warmth that had nothing to do with the summer day. Over the past months, she'd grown increasingly aware of Xavier as more than her employer. She noticed how the ranch hands respected him, how children from neighboring ranches adored him, how his rare full smile transformed his serious face. How long have you been alone out here? She asked suddenly. Xavier seemed surprised by the question. My sister visits occasionally. And there's always people around the hands. Neighbors. That's not what I meant. He met her eyes. I know. He sighed, leaning back against a tree trunk. There haven't been many opportunities to court properly out here. The nearest eligible women are ranchers' daughters half my age or widows with children already grown. And you want a family? Someday. He looked out over the meadow. A ranch should have children in it. My father always said that. Hope tried to ignore the ache in her chest at the thought of Xavier with a faceless wife, surrounded by children. You'll make a good father. Perhaps. He turned to her. What about you? No suitors lined up in Silver Creek. Hope laughed. Hardly. Besides, I've been too busy learning the cattle business. Is that what you want? The cattle business. I want. Hope paused, surprised by the intensity of his gaze. I want somewhere to belong, someone to build something with. The honesty of her words startled her. Xavier moved closer, his hand finding hers on the blanket. Hope! The distant sound of hoofbeats interrupted whatever he'd been about to say. One of the ranch hands was galloping toward them, waving urgently. Boss! There's trouble at the north fence line. Looks like Henderson's men are cutting our wire again. Xavier was immediately on his feet, the moment broken. We'll head there now. Hope, you should return to the ranch. I'm coming with you, she said firmly, already gathering their things. The fence dispute with the neighboring Henderson ranch had been simmering for months. Henderson claimed the creek that formed the property line had shifted, giving him rights to additional grazing land. Xavier maintained the original survey was correct. When they reached the fence line, 3 men were systematically cutting the wire fence Xavier had installed that spring. 2 ranch hands from the Silver Q watched from horseback, rifles ready but not raised. That's far enough, Henderson, Xavier called, dismounting. We settled this boundary legally. Frank Henderson, a burly man with a florid face, spat on the ground. Papers don't mean nothing out here, Quinn. This creek's moved, and the water rights come with it. Hope stayed on her horse, watching as Xavier approached the boundary line. His posture was relaxed, but she noticed how his hand rested near his holstered pistol. The survey's clear, Xavier said calmly. If you have a dispute, take it to the territorial court. Courts? Henderson sneered. City folk nonsense. We settle things man to man out here. Is that what you want? Xavier's voice remained even. A shooting war over 100 yards of creek bed? How many men are you willing to lose? Henderson's confidence wavered slightly. The Silver Q employed twice as many hands as his struggling operation. You think you're something special with your fancy ranch and Eastern notions, Henderson snarled, glancing at Hope. Even got yourself a lady bookkeeper. Well, some of us remember when you were nothing but a boy trying to fill your daddy's boots. Xavier didn't rise to the bait. Take your men and go home, Frank. If you want to discuss water rights civilly, come to the house tomorrow. For a tense moment, Hope feared Henderson would escalate the confrontation. Then he gestured to his men. This ain't over, Quinn. As Henderson and his men rode away, Xavier returned to Hope. Sorry you had to witness that. Does he often cause trouble? Frank's desperate. 2 bad winters have nearly ruined him. Xavier checked the cut fence. He's too proud to accept help, too stubborn to change his methods. Hope admired Xavier's compassion, even for a man who'd threatened him. It was one more quality to add to the growing list of reasons she found herself thinking of him at odd moments throughout her days. That evening, Hope couldn't sleep. The confrontation at the fence line had unsettled her, bringing back memories of her father's increasingly erratic behavior before he abandoned her. She wrapped a shawl around her nightdress and stepped onto her porch, hoping the night air would calm her thoughts. A light still burned in Xavier's study window. On impulse, Hope crossed the yard to the main house and knocked softly. Xavier opened the door, surprise evident on his face. Hope, is everything all right? I couldn't sleep, she admitted. I saw your light. He stepped back, allowing her to enter. I'm just going over some contracts. Would you like some tea? In the study, papers were spread across his desk, along with a half-empty whiskey glass. Hope settled into a leather chair while Xavier prepared tea in the adjoining kitchen. Are you worried about Henderson? She asked when he returned. Xavier handed her a steaming cup. Not particularly. His bark's worse than his bite. You handled him well. He shrugged. Violence rarely solves anything permanent. Hope studied him over the rim of her cup. You're different from most men I've known. Is that good or bad? A small smile played at his lips. Good, she said softly. Definitely good. Xavier leaned against his desk, watching her with an intensity that made her heartbeat quicken. Why couldn't you sleep, Hope? Really? She looked down at her tea. Henderson reminded me of my father. The anger, the desperation. She took a deep breath. I never told you the full truth about why I came west. Xavier sat in the chair beside hers, close enough that she could smell the clean scent of soap on his skin. Tell me now. The story poured out of her mother's long illness that drained their savings, her father's descent into gambling and drinking, their journey west that was supposed to be a fresh start. Finally, she described that day in Silver Creek, watching her father's wagon disappear, knowing he had chosen a new chance for himself over his responsibility to her. He traded me for a ticket to California, she finished, her voice barely audible. Left me with nothing but my bag and the clothes I wore. Xavier's hand found hers, his grip warm and steady. His loss, he said, the simple words carrying a wealth of meaning. Hope looked up, startled to find him so close, his blue eyes dark with emotion. I was so ashamed, she whispered. I thought everyone in town knew I'd been discarded like something worthless. You could never be worthless, Hope Johnson. Xavier's hand moved to her cheek, his touch feather light. You're the most valuable person on this entire ranch. The moment hung between them, fragile and charged. Hope knew she should leave, return to her cabin, maintain the proper distance between employer and employee. Instead, she leaned into his touch. Xavier's kiss was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. When Hope responded, her hands finding their way to his shoulders, the kiss deepened, years of loneliness dissolving in the connection between them. When they finally separated, Xavier rested his forehead against hers. I should apologize, he said, his voice rough. Don't you dare, Hope replied, surprising herself with her boldness. He laughed softly. I've wanted to do that for months. Why didn't you? I didn't want you to think it was expected, that your position here depended on. He gestured between them. Hope touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. I never thought that. Good. He captured her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Because I care for you, Hope. More than I should, perhaps. I care for you too, she admitted, the words both frightening and freeing. Xavier stood, pulling her gently to her feet. It's late. We should both get some rest. At her door, he kissed her once more, a promise in the gentle pressure of his lips. We'll talk tomorrow. Hope returned to her cabin, her mind whirling with new possibilities. For the first time since her mother's death, she allowed herself to imagine a future filled with joy rather than mere survival. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Hope was reviewing supply orders when she heard horses in the yard. Looking out the office window, she saw 3 men dismounting. One wore the badge of a territorial marshal. Xavier met them on the porch, his stance wary but welcoming. Hope couldn't hear their conversation, but saw Xavier's expression darken. When he glanced toward the office window, she stepped back, suddenly uneasy. Minutes later, Xavier entered the office, accompanied by the marshal. Miss Johnson, the lawman said, removing his hat. I'm Marshal Dawson. I'd like to ask you some questions about your father, Edmund Johnson. Hope's stomach twisted. My father? Has something happened to him? He was arrested in Sacramento for fraud and theft. Claims he has a daughter who can vouch for his character. The marshal's eyes were kind but assessing. Are you that daughter? Xavier moved to stand beside her. Hope doesn't have to answer any questions without legal counsel. It's all right, Hope said, her voice steadier than she felt. Yes, I'm Edmund Johnson's daughter, but I haven't seen him since he left me in Silver Creek last year. The marshal nodded. He abandoned you? Yes. The admission still stung, despite the months that had passed. That matches what we've heard from others. Marshal Dawson replaced his hat. Your father's facing serious charges, Miss Johnson. He swindled several investors with a fake mining scheme. Hope wasn't surprised. The pattern was familiar, her father finding new victims for his schemes, moving on when discovery threatened. I'm sorry for those he harmed, but I can't help you. We've had no contact since he left. After the marshal departed, Xavier closed the office door. Are you all right? Hope nodded, though her hands trembled slightly. I expected something like this eventually. He's been running cons since Mother died. Xavier took her hands in his. You're nothing like him, Hope. Nothing. She looked up into his face, seeing only sincerity and concern. Sometimes I worry that I am. That I'm just waiting for the right moment to run. To leave everything behind like he did. Are you? Xavier asked quietly. No, she realized as she said it. I want to stay. To build something lasting. She squeezed his hands. With you, if that's what you want to. Xavier's smile was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. It is. More than anything. The weeks that followed passed in a sweet haze of work and courtship. By day, they maintained propriety, conducting ranch business with professional focus. Evenings were theirs walks along the creek, quiet conversations on the porch, kisses stolen in the shadow of the barn. Xavier formally asked Hope to marry him on a crisp September evening, presenting her with a simple gold ring that had belonged to his mother. Hope's acceptance was immediate and joyful, her heart finally finding the home it had sought for so long. They planned a small October wedding, but first, Xavier insisted on making everything proper. I want to adopt the Henderson property, he told Hope one evening as they reviewed the ranch accounts. Franks agreed to sell. The creek issue will be moot then. Hope was stunned. Can we afford it? With careful management, yes. He smiled at her use of we. It means postponing some other improvements, but it's worth it for peace with our neighbors. The next day, they rode to Silver Creek together to file the property transfer and announce their engagement. The town had grown since Hope's arrival, with new storefronts and more families settling in the area. As they tied their horses outside the land office, a disheveled figure emerged from the saloon across the street. Hope froze, her hand tightening on Xavier's arm. What is it? He asked, following her gaze. My father, she whispered. Edmund Johnson hadn't seen them yet. He looked older, his once handsome face ravaged by drink and hard living. A woman in a gaudy dress hung on his arm, laughing at something he said. I thought he was in custody in California, Xavier said, his body tense beside her. Apparently not anymore. Hope's heart pounded painfully. Xavier, I don't want him to see me. We can come back another day. Hope shook her head. No, we have business to conduct. She straightened her spine. I won't let him disrupt our plans. They had almost reached the land office door when Edmund's voice called out, Hope? Hope, is that you? Hope turned slowly. Her father was crossing the street, his expression a mixture of disbelief and calculation. The saloon woman had disappeared. Well, look at you, Edmund said, his gaze taking in her well-made dress and the man beside her. All grown up and prospering. I always knew you'd land on your feet. Xavier's hand was warm at the small of Hope's back, a silent support. Mr. Johnson, he said, his voice cool. I'm Xavier Quinn. Edmund's eyes narrowed shrewdly. The rancher? Well, my girl certainly aimed high. What do you want, father? Hope asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Can't a father say hello to his only daughter? Edmund attempted a wounded look that might once have swayed her. I've had some bad luck, but things are turning around. I could use a small loan to get back on my feet. Hope felt Xavier tense beside her, but she spoke before he could intervene. No, Edmund's face hardened. Now, Hope, that's not very daughterly. After all I did, raising you alone after your mother passed. After you abandoned me without a word. Hope interrupted, her voice rising slightly. After you gambled away everything we had and left me with nothing but a carpet bag in a strange town. People on the street were beginning to stare, but Hope didn't care. Years of hurt and anger surfaced, giving her strength. I don't owe you anything, she continued. Not money, not respect, not even this conversation. Edmund's expression turned ugly. You ungrateful. That's enough. Xavier stepped forward, his considerable height allowing him to tower over the older man. Miss Johnson has made herself clear. I suggest you move along. Edmund looked between them, clearly calculating his odds. Fine, he spat finally. But you remember this, girl. You're just like me at heart, out for yourself. Don't pretend otherwise. She's nothing like you, Xavier said, his voice deceptively soft. And she never will be. Hope watched her father slouch back toward the saloon, a hollow feeling in her chest. Xavier turned to her, concern evident in his eyes. Are you all right? Yes, she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. I am. That evening, after completing their business in town, they sat together on Xavier's porch, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. What my father said, Hope began hesitantly. About me being like him. Xavier took her hand. He was wrong. But what if I do have his selfishness in me? His willingness to abandon people who depend on me? Hope. Xavier turned to face her fully. The very fact that you worry about such things proves you're nothing like him. You've shown me your heart in 1,000 ways, your kindness to the ranch hands, your patience with the orphaned calves, your fair dealings with everyone you meet. He kissed her gently. Your father gave you life, nothing more. You built yourself into the woman you are today. Hope rested her head against his shoulder. I love you, Xavier Quinn. And I love you, Hope Johnson. Soon to be Hope Quinn, if you're still willing. More than ever, she whispered. Their wedding took place on a perfect October day, with the aspen trees gilded in autumn gold against the blue Wyoming sky. The entire ranch turned out, along with neighbors and townspeople from Silver Creek. Hope wore a cream-colored dress ordered from Denver, with wildflowers in her hair instead of a veil. Xavier's face when he saw her walking toward him was a memory Hope knew she would treasure forever, wonder and love and promise all mixed together in his blue eyes. The territorial judge pronounced them husband and wife beneath an arch of twisted branches decorated with late-blooming flowers. When Xavier kissed her, the cheers of the gathered crowd seemed to echo off the distant mountains. Later, during the celebration feast, Hope found a moment alone with Mrs. Halloway, who had become a mother figure to her over the past year. I never thought I'd find this, Hope confessed, watching Xavier laughing with his ranch hands across the yard. A place to belong. Someone who sees me clearly and loves me anyway. Mrs. Halloway patted her hand. Some of us spend our whole lives searching for what you found, my dear. It's a rare blessing. That night, in the privacy of the main house that was now their shared home, Xavier and Hope began their life together as husband and wife. Their passion, built on months of growing love and trust, blossomed into something beautiful and profound. Afterward, as they lay tangled together, Xavier traced the line of Hope's cheek in the moonlight streaming through the window. No regrets? He asked softly. Hope turned to kiss his palm. Not one. This is where I was always meant to be. 1 year later, Hope stood on the porch of the ranch house, cradling her newborn daughter in her arms. The spring air was sweet with promise, the land stretching green and vibrant around the silver queue. Xavier joined her, wrapping one arm around her waist while gently touching their daughter's tiny hand with the other. She's perfect, he murmured, just like her mother. Hope leaned into his embrace, overwhelmed with gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. From abandoned daughter to beloved wife and now mother, she had found her true home. What should we name her? Xavier asked. Hope looked out over the ranch, their ranch, built with love and hard work and faith in each other. Elizabeth, she said, after my mother. She would have loved it here. Elizabeth Quinn. Xavier tested the name, smiling. It suits her. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of gold and pink, Hope thought about the mysterious ways life unfolded. Her father's ultimate betrayal had led her to this moment of perfect happiness, to a man who cherished rather than abandoned her, to a future filled with promise. I love you, she told Xavier. The words simple but carrying the weight of all they had built together. His kiss was gentle, mindful of the precious bundle between them. And I love you, Hope Quinn, until the stars fall from the sky. Together, they watched darkness settle over their land, secure in the knowledge that whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them side by side, a family forged not by blood, but by choice and love and unwavering commitment to each other.